Now, if we look at the overall unit that we've done in terms of coverage that we've done so far, so if you look at this particular unit focuses on understanding how people work within organizations. So here the idea is, in the first learning outcome, we studied the process of recruitment, selection, job preparation, job description, how companies advertise and recruit people. Sometimes you look at legislation. So in the merit and extension activities, we looked at the legislation which is there, and we looked at in particular the extension of one of the activity, which is discrimination. Under the Discrimination, Equality and Diversity Act, we looked at the Discrimination Act as well. That progressed nicely into understanding, once the employees are within the organization, how do we give them job description when they have the job role, how do they perform on a day-to-day basis, and how do you evaluate that performance. So learning outcome 2 focused mostly on performance and reward management, what motivates employees, how HR managers look at appraisal systems, and how they measure performance by putting in a reward system in place, like rewards which include incentive, bonus, promotions, holiday trips, things like that, which are dependent on the level at which the employee works and what kind of motivation is more suited in terms of reward management is appropriately designed to help employees be more productive and help achieve organizational goals. So typical example in that case would be sales organizations look at always putting in some sort of an incentive, which could be that if you close sales, if you bring in leads and you are able to bring in new customers, you get some additional amount in terms of incentive or bonus every month, depending on the leads that you close. The third one was when people are working within the organization, they're performing, but in order to ensure that they're performing always at the highest level or at the best level of their abilities, training, development, coaching, mentoring as a concept comes in. And sometimes you look at role changes or changes of roles which have to be done when a person outgrows a particular role or is very confident and competent in doing a particular role, has been doing it for a number of years. And that is where, sometimes organizations also look at doing psychometric tests to see if the person has the ability to move into a different role or can perform a different function. And here the learning outcome 3 focused on looking at, when you have employees within the organization, how do you make them more efficient, more productive by the process of, learning, training, development, coaching and mentoring, depending on the level at which they work within the organization. With nicely leading into learning outcome 4, and here what we want to now do is, like we recruit people, we look at their performance, and then we review the performance. After they get into training and development, how do we look at reviewing the training and development of the staff and employees working, and what kind of benefits the training brings across to the staff in general to help them perform better on their duties, and how training programs can be made effective is something that we are going to study in learning outcome 4. So I've got a few slides in particular, for learning outcome 4, which look at dwelling into some of the key concepts of, expanding into things like which we looked at was, in this case, in learning outcome 3, we looked at describing the learning cycle. But what we want to now do in the learning outcome 4, the first task is understand what are the elements of the learning cycle. So here, the idea would be to try and understand the various ways through which learning can happen within the organization. So for this, we can tip back into the same document of 3.1, because that document which I sent you as a handout has a number of ways in which it clearly describes that how learning, the learning cycle in general can be looked at from a point of view of the development within the organization. So if I just open that document up, and let's look at it briefly. So here, when we talked about the approach of learning, what we are looking at is looking at the various elements of training, and then what are the characteristics when these trainings are put together. So some part of it is to do with the fact that we are going to look at in individual cases. When we look at, say, for example, seminars and conferences, we want to look at what are the key things why seminars and conferences are put together. So when you look at training a large number of people within the organization, you look at, in a way, if I say a refresher training which is being organized on an annual basis for a number of employees, within a particular department, say it could be sales and marketing, then rather than have employees individually train on a particular concept or a new product which the company is launching, it makes perfect sense for the company to look at doing the training under the pretext of a seminar or a annual conference in which all the sales and marketing employees can actually attend and be trained at the same time, which also provides for different types of benefits. And those benefits could be benefits in terms of networking benefits amongst different teams within the organization. When I say different teams, means different sales managers, for example, different marketing managers. They get to meet each other if they are in different locations. The other advantage for that tends to be financial side of things, which is where the company looks at understanding that, okay, if we do this training on a one-on-one basis or send one by one, some staff sponsor some of them to undertake a course, might not be cost effective, but a more cost effective approach would be to get all of them onto a single platform of a seminar or a conference and have a professional trainer do the training for a day. That would mean saving of costs and also looking at everyone being trained on a particular day, which reduces efforts and also introduces the element of cost savings for a lot of organizations. So when we look at the characteristics of why trainings can be done in a particular format, would be to look at understanding the different types and what are the benefits or the advantages of doing those kind of trainings. And that is what we look at in learning outcome 4.3. Let's look at going back to the first assessment criteria, which is talking about the key elements of learning organization. And if I may ask you a quick question here, why do you think learning is very important within an organization? Any ideas in terms of why do you think learning is important within an organization?
Because always some new things are coming out. Obviously.
That's absolutely correct. So one of the things that you mentioned could be the fact that sometimes you see companies keep introducing new products, new services, and one of the ways to update and also pass this information around would be to look at the process of training. And that would mean that sometimes you look at this being done through maybe the head of department sending out an email saying that, okay, this is what is going to happen, this is what we are introducing, and that happens through through the way of email. Sometimes you will see in big organizations there are events organized, or you put up notices across various notice boards within different departments to say that this is a major event which the company is going to hold, and participation is mandatory, and they would seek volunteers from different departments. So the way we look at the reason why we look at learning is important is because there are lots of changes which are happening in the environment. There are lots of changes which are happening with respect to its competitors. Lots of changes which could happen primarily because these changes could be external or internal. So external changes could be, for example, in the UK, there's a lot happening on Brexit. A lot of big companies who need to deal with import and exports and are having businesses which deal with companies in Europe would need some part of their employees to be trained depending on whatever the outcome. So if we align closely with EU, then they would need to not understand maybe the laws and legislation, because we'll closely work with the EU in the customs union. But if we are to leave and not be in a customs union, then in that case, the law and legislation which will apply to countries in which they import and export needs to be learned and needs to be mastered with some of the employees who basically look at the import and export side of things within the organization. So it could be external changes which force the organization to do learning, like Brexit as an example. It could be internal changes, as you mentioned, that new things coming out, new products and services which company is about to introduce and sell in the market. So the first step would be to train its own employees and staff members within the organization to ensure that they understand where this product would come in, what would be the target market, the pricing, how it would be sold, and things like what is the competition for this product and service. So they want to make sure that internally the staff is aware of these aspects of the new products and service being introduced. So changes could be external and internal. It could be because of new products and services being introduced. It could be because of legislation being introduced, which forces an organization to learn. If you look at last year, one of the other reasons, when Data Protection Act was being modified into GDPR, and that had to be, every organization or business within Europe had to comply with that legislation by 25th of May 2018. So a lot of trainings were being organized by third-party vendors, training providers, to ensure that a lot of these organizations understand the relevance of GDPR and how it is changing from Data Protection Act, and what are the new things being added on under the new regulation of General Data Protection Regulation (GDPR) to ensure that the websites, your any sort of external communication you do is all meeting the guidelines set in the new law introduced by EU. So when you look at that also kind of was an external reason, but it forced the organization to undergo some sort of learning, because the data protection officer or the person responsible for managing records had to be trained, and if the size of the organization was quite big, then in that case, you had to look at training a number of people, because that would have meant that if they are not updated on the legislation, the companies could be fined up to £500,000, anywhere from 20,000 to £500,000, depending on the size and the operation of the business. So learning is required because of different reasons within the organization. Broadly, we could classify them into external, internal. It could be, when we look at external, it could be political reasons, it could be technological reasons. You could bring that pedestal into it. And then internally, it could be to do with the things which are in control of the organization and the products and services they are introducing and things like that. So it is important, because if you do not learn, what you will also see that the performance within the organization at some stage begins to drop. So that is why learning is also quite important. Now, if we are to look at, how learning was defined in terms of, the concept of learning organization, one or two, authors that we put together in the presentation, Sench, for example, states, that he defined basically the continuous adoption of new policies, processes to improve the performance within an organization leads to something called a learning organization. And he identified, 5 elements to it. So these elements are described here. They talk about, team learning, system thinking, shared vision, some of the mental models, and, personal mastery. So we look at each of these in a bit more detail in terms of understanding what are the elements of a learning organization. So when we refer to personal mastery, what it basically reflects or talks about is that this is learning which happens at the individual level. Because if you're given a responsibility, like if you enter invoices in the office and you work within the accounts department, it is down to you to master the use of the accountancy software or any sort of software which the company uses. And this, to a certain extent, the company will provide you training when you join the role. But the reason why you've been selected to do that particular role is because you have qualification, experience, background, which say that you have some sort of a personal mastery to be able to work within that department. But once you're in, and if the organization introduces new things or new softwares, then it is down to you to be able to, master the use of that particular new software, or adapt your working in such a way that you are able to, function well and be able to execute your responsibilities. So first part of the learning learning organization is when you look at personal or self, and in this case, you are looking at making sure that anything that you need to do on a day-to-day basis, you have a bit of a mastery on that, because that is directly related to your daily responsibility or day-to-day operation. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The second was basically to look at understanding, how when we say mental models, it basically meant that here the individuals, need to compare, the ideas that they put forward with what is actually practically possible outside in the practical world. So when we say that sometimes you look at discussions which happen within the organization, and these discussions are looking at brainstorming to come up with new concepts or products. So sometimes you have to check for the sanity of these new ideas against the fact that whether these will be practical or not practical. And in this case, what we look at is a lot of organizations look at doing sessions like brainstorming sessions or discussions or closed room discussions, which primarily happen to see if they can come up with new concepts or products and services which allow the organization to differentiate itself from the competitors. So here the mental models basically focus on new ideas, and these new ideas which can actually be turned into a reality. So when we look at the example of, for example, in this case I would say Steve Jobs, and we look at Apple. Now sometime way back in 2003, when we did not even have the iPhone or the iPads and things like that, he had predicted that in a couple of years' time, there will be a situation wherein people will have similar or maybe have alternate devices through which they will be able to access the internet. Now, in 2003, it was very difficult to envisage that you will have smartphones which will allow you to connect to Facebook or send an email, take a photograph, or things which will allow you to do things by touching the phone or touching the screen. But this was something which was being developed within the organization, and this development primarily was happening within closed doors. And there were a number of people which were, working, number of teams, let's put it this way, which were working together to come up with ideas which could be made or at some stage made into reality. And these were, ideas through which the organization looks at planning long-term roadmaps of bringing out new products or new services over a point in time. You look at pharma companies, for example, they do a lot of research and development. The research and development keeps happening around the fact that they keep testing molecules, and they are tested, on various aspects. But before they are introduced, they are made sure that they are safe for consumption. And once they have been declared safe, or significant amount of testing has been done, and discussions internally and the trials have been done, then only they are introduced into the market as commercial medicines or medicines available or commercial drugs which are available to people for buying. So this is all an outcome of something called mental models. That means a lot of discussion which keeps happening within the organization on new product development or new types of services which the company wants to introduce. The third type which Senj actually proposed was that he said that sometimes organizations look at introducing something on a shared vision. So when you see leaders within the organization, they are able to get people behind them because they clearly understand that this is what is going to be required maybe in the future. So they are, let me put it this way, they are able to kind of, they have a certain bit of insight into how things are going to shape up in the industry. And the reason why they have this insight is primarily because they've been working closely to understand and study how the market and the sector is moving. So what they try and create to get people behind their idea or their concept is they create a concept of something called a shared vision. Sometimes you will see that this is what is reflected in the organizational vision and mission statements. So when you look at Tesco, for example, it says every little helps. You look at ASDA, it says saving you money every day. So when you look at these adverts and when you look at these messages which come across, they actually show what is the goal or the ultimate goal of the organization. They want to make products and services available to customers, but at the same time make sure that they are able to save on money, or their pound actually travels longer in terms of gets you more products and services. But this vision is something which is created by leaders, and in order for the people or employees within the organization to buy that vision, they have to translate this into something which is in a much simpler language, something called let's put it this way, a shared vision through which a common goal, let me put it this way, a common goal which most employees are able to relate to. And this then becomes one of the ways through which the organization gets behind it and becomes one type of a learning model when people believe in something that this could happen, or believe in the person that this person can make it happen. They get behind it, and then the efforts being put to ensure that that goal and objective is fulfilled is basically the concept of something called shared vision. Is that okay?
Yep.
Now, the other bits we look at is team learning. So team learning concepts dip into, when we look at a number of members going into training, a number of members looking at working together to, bringing in components of their personal experience or, mastery in a particular area. Some of them who worked in different departments from time to time and have had the opportunity to work with, people who have created that vision. They all come together to look at doing some sort of what you call team learning. And here the idea is they help train a lot of other employees within the organization. So something like the concept of train the trainer, or training more employees and staff or colleagues within the organization. And team learning can typically happen through, say, for example, a dialogue. It can happen through certain exercises which the organization can undertake, and these could be portals which they set up for say, for example, training and development. A typical example that I would give you here is sometimes you see within a company when you work, if there is a training opportunity which comes, the manager recommends, okay, this time it's going to be Alexandra who is going for the training. But when you go in for the training, before even you go, your manager tells you that when you're going in for the training, this time I've nominated you because you will get the training, and then you will come back and train the others in the department or your other colleagues in terms of what you've learned in that training. Isn't it? You've seen that, isn't it? So this allows for a bit of rotation, but at the same time, different employees get different opportunities to attend training or seminars, and when they come back, they train the team internally, and that way the understanding they have got when they have returned back from training or attending a training event or a seminar is then translated into team learning happening within that department, because you come in and train some of your other colleagues once you have attended that particular side of things. The fifth type basically looks at, something called a system thinking. Now, system thinking, is something which is an approach which Sen's actually proposed, wherein he said that, sometimes what he acknowledges was that because of the way big organizations work, they have complex workings. That means sometimes you're working in one particular department, but you work indirectly with a number of other colleagues in another department. And I'll give you a simple example here. And that leads to what is called system thinking. So sometimes you have to, jump to conclusions by adding 2 plus 2 or adding 1 plus 1 to say that this is what it will, end up with. So here the concept of you having to deduct or deduce end result or some sort of a meaning is basically system thinking. And I'll give you an example to clarify this. So when you look at large organizations, and I say, let's pick up Microsoft. Now we use Windows, on Microsoft, Windows PC. Now, sometimes you see that people working on this platform, when I say people working, means people within the company who created this product working on this, have to look at a lot of different things for this product to work. So when you launch Windows, you have not just the operating system running, but you have the keyboard, mouse, your Microsoft Word and all the other elements of that software running together. But the person or the team working behind this, has to kind of make everything work. So here, what you will see is sometimes managers or people working within these teams look at understanding how the job role and the function would be when they work in somebody else's shoes or in some other department. So here, if a person working on the Windows team wants to understand how the Xbox side of things would work, he would also interact with that person or his colleague on the other side to see that, what would be the, relation between working between the two. And here, in order to develop, both of them are Microsoft products. So what I want to say here is that because both of them are Microsoft products, sometimes you have to understand that these things have to work on a PC together. So you launch Xbox, you are watching Netflix, you say, for example, launch Windows and you download an app called Netflix, and it works on Windows as well and it works on Xbox as well. So this requires a bit of systematic thinking when product managers or people introducing new products or new types of services have to look at that this particular product can be used across the platforms which Microsoft is introducing. It could be Windows, it could be Xbox, it could be the browser, which is Bing that they have, or some of the other services like Windows Phone and other bits, and they will need to work across the platform. So that is where it requires a bit of system thinking, that they need to look at an organized approach which allows them to introduce products and services which can play across or work across different platforms. Is this example clear, or do I explain with another example? Are you able to follow this?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I give you another simple example on this, you look at, you buy clothes, you go to the H&M store, correct? Now, when you look at a company opening a new H&M store, what they have is a bit of a thinking behind that. All the stores, how they brand them, how they lay the products out in all the stores is pretty much the same, isn't it? So when a marketing team within the head office in H&M is tasked with the approach of opening a new store, in a particular city, they need to look at from a systems thinking point of view that because the process is defined, when they open a new store, the new store will have this kind of branding, a signboard outside, some mannequins with clothes, the men's section, kids section, and the ladies section. But these are standard things which are going to go across in any store. So what they know very clearly is that once this new store is to be launched, the team working behind to open this new store will, all of them in this team will think in one similar way, because they have a very clear defined process of ensuring how the store is launched, how it looks, and what kind of services it provides. So there's a bit of system thinking or a standard thinking, which is built in, because this process has been defined by the organization. And when a new store is to be opened, they look at that, picking up that new store manual, and then they go by the checklist. Okay, shortlist place, which has maybe the mall, look at a long-term lease of 10 years. Then the fitters go in, they look at various sections, and then at some stage, just look at stocking. So everything is quite organized, and everything is defined in the system in terms of how this process of launching a new store will happen. And that is why you call this concept called system thinking. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So when we look at the various parts of the elements of learning organization, what we want to be able to understand is how organizations learn, and that is what is the concept of system thinking, the learning organization, which was introduced by Senj, and he described these 5 different components in terms of how organizations actually learn. Now, when we go across to the elements of training cycle. So here, what we want to be able to do is understand what are the various reasons why training is put into place. So if I look at this particular chart, this diagram, why do you think sometimes you need training, or you need to get into getting some supervision, or let's put it this way, some help and guidance to be able to learn to do something? That could be because you're learning something new, right? It is something you're doing it for the first time. It could be because in some cases, when you're doing it, you're not doing it properly, or you're not doing it to an extent where it gives the desired result which the manager is asking or looking for. In some cases, it could be that you're doing it, but you're maybe taking too long to be able to finish that task. And lots of things, but maybe one of the cases that I can think of is that the output that you produced, it's not something which was actually required. So if I say, as an example, that if I work within an organization, I have a manager, and he says that, okay, can you do a bit of follow-up with customers today whose orders are pending? Now, when he gives this particular instruction to me, what I can do is I can interpret this in a number of ways. That means I need to call up all the customers. I need to email all these customers with pending order, asking for when are they going to complete it, or place the order so that this order fulfillment cycle is complete. I might also look at visiting some of the customers, but because he's not described it in terms of the responsibility well, sometimes you'd see that your interpretation might be very different from what the request from your manager is. So in this case, in order for staff and employees to have a very clear and a same understanding of what it means, sometimes you will see within organizations you have manuals. So you buy a new product, you have a instructions manual which comes along with it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You buy a new washing machine, for example, or you buy a new microwave, and you have a small instruction manual which comes along with it. Sometimes you don't read the manual and you open the product and start using it straight away because you know the functions of the product. But if you bought something and there are some additional functions in that product which you're not aware of, then what you do is you pick up the instructions manual and go through this to familiarize yourself with what are the new functions which you have not used on the washing machine or on the microwave, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what you're doing at this stage is you're doing a bit of self-learning by reading through the instruction manual to see what all features or functions or attributes does this product have that you bought. So similarly, within the organization, a training cycle can be done. A training cycle can be put together because of various reasons, and these reasons could be sometimes the managers feel that the assessment of needs have to be done again because they feel that the employee is not performing to what the task has been given. So what they do is they look at assessing the gap areas by asking you to undertake some, let's put it this way, some tests or some, diagnostic tests. And once the results come out, what they tend to do is they put some sort of learning objectives in place. Now, these learning objectives would be to say that, okay, you require to use Microsoft Word on a daily basis, but what is happening is your typing speed is too slow. So the organization might ask you to do a course, in Microsoft Word so you can understand some of the functions and features well, which allows you to work and work more efficiently while using that software. Once the development of these objectives is done, they put you into some sort of a training. That means you attend a day's training, 2 hours training, or some sort of a training, and that allows you to develop that skill. Now, once that skill is developed, obviously you put it to test, and once the skill is put to test, after 3 months or after 6 months, they do another appraisal to see if you are performing at the level at which they want you to perform. And if they still feel that there is a gap, then they again analyze those needs, put some learning objectives, put you into training. Once you come out of training, you start implementing it, and then they again evaluate performance. Now, how is this done in the organization on an annual basis? If we go back to learning outcome 1 and 2, we look at our performance appraisals which are done. You do 360-degree appraisal, you do performance appraisal, you take some feedback and suggestions for suppliers and clients if you're in a customer-facing role, and then if they feel there are areas which require improvement, they put you into some sort of training and development. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this particular cycle, in terms of how it is done, why it is done, and why they are classed as the training cycle, is being explained in these 3, 4, 5 slides that I put together. So here the idea is you're looking at understanding why training is required, what are the gap areas, how to put the most appropriate training or development in place. Once it has been done, you've attended the program, the evaluation of the performance can be done at regular intervals, and if they still find gap areas, the same cycle is again repeated in terms of making sure that you are able to gain the skills or reskill which is required for you to perform your job role effectively. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And towards the end, I think in the last assessment criteria, what we're looking at finding out is that what are the key characteristics of effective training? Why do we say the training has been effective? Sometimes you go to a training course or you attend a seminar, you attend a conference, you feel that you've come out and you've learned a lot of things. It gives you that feeling that you've got, you've learned a lot of things. or you've come out, as a better person in terms of these are things that you weren't aware of, but now you know these things and you consciously are aware of that these are the things which are involved in the whole process of what you do. So sometimes you will see people in the sales side are put time and again across the years, once a year they're put into a training to understand the whole sales cycle. Sometimes you will see marketing people or people who work in production, engineering, different departments are put through a training cycle once a year. And when you attend that training, you feel, okay, now I've learned what does this mean? Sometimes I've contacted the customer 3 times and I know that this has come out as an outcome, but now I understand why has it come out as an outcome, because you get that knowledge and you get that information when you attended that training. So when you look at the characteristics of training and effective training, here I would give you a simple example is sometimes, if you're caught speeding, if you jump a traffic light or you're caught speeding on a speed camera, sometimes what happens is the DVLA sends you a training, sends you an option that you need to attend a training course, or you take 3 points and pay £60 fine, on jumping the traffic light or, for example, speeding on a particular road. Now, most of us opt in for that training. And the reason why you opt in for that training is because you feel that, okay, I got my license, a couple of years back, and maybe over the years, I've forgotten some of the rules and regulations. And for me, attending the training would be a good thing, because it will help me refresh the traffic rules, the rules and regulations which are required. And in general, it will also help me save taking on 3 points on my driver's license. So when you look at that and you get into that training of 3, 4, 5 hours, when you go into and get that training done, you come out of it and you say, okay, when I did take the driving license a couple of years back, maybe 10 years back, okay, that was what I thought. But now, the rules have changed. I've gained so much, I've learned so much from that training. So you come out as if you come out and you feel that you've actually gained a lot of knowledge in terms of the refresher course or the refresher training you've done, isn't it?
Yep.
So when you think of that, those are what are we classifying as something called the characteristics of effective training, because that training you genuinely feel when you attend it, you come out and you feel, okay, I've gained something, I've gained more knowledge. I've got, my understanding was this, but now I've corrected my understanding, and I need to be looking at these things when I drive, and that will help me avoid this kind of fine or this kind of breaking of the rule. So when we look at the characteristics of training, what we are looking at is we need to understand why, how do we start a training, how the assessment is done. Sometimes you look at things like, how the training is attended, when, and how is it delivered. And those tend to be what are called the, characteristics of effective training. So when you go in that particular thing, what you will see is that the trainer is actually using a combination of video, whiteboard, some activity, and he or she has also given you some papers or documentation to complete. So that is getting you engaged fully in that DVLA's driver training. That means you are able to watch a video. He or she, the trainer, will ask you a few questions, put you on the spot. You'll be asked to complete a survey. There'll be some documentation that you will receive, and that would all refresh your knowledge and your understanding of why the rules have changed, or how the rules are actually applied when you look at jumping a traffic light, or speeding on a particular road against the speed limit which has been set. And those tend to be the characteristics of those trainings which make you feel confident when you come out of that course that, okay, now I'm a more informed person, I know the rules, I'm very updated, and this should not happen again. That positive feeling remains with you for a couple of weeks. After that, you go back to your usual, isn't it? So
Yeah.
you'll speed up when you know the camera is coming. You'll actually slow down to 30, but you give it a couple of weeks, and once that effect has worn off, you go back to your normal self. So that's why sometimes you will see that training is a continuous process, and a lot of organizations, specifically in areas like sales, marketing, production, engineering, wherein you're doing the same set of jobs and roles again and again, and it becomes a bit like a monologue or a monotonous exercise. Here is where the companies, push in the concept of training. And the reason why they ask you to train again and again, maybe 3 months, 6 months, depending on the profession you're in, maybe 12 months, is because they want you to be current and most updated, in terms of when you're actually doing your role or, performing your job role and responsibilities. Is that okay?
Yes.
I think sometimes you look at, when the training has happened, you get a survey. Every trainer will ask you to complete a survey. Like we send out a survey once a month, right? And we ask you to give us a feedback in terms of how the course is progressing, how you're getting along in the assessment. Do you like your tutor? Is the tutor up to date? Is the tutor able to make the session interesting? So what we are trying to do is also trying to get feedback in terms of understanding our delivery. But at the same time, what we want to do is engage with the learner so that the course and the delivery of the training or the course that we're doing is actually meeting the requirements of the learner. It is something which the learner is gaining from. And the reasons why you look at this surveys is also to look at improving quality. In general, they also look at getting feedback in terms of what the trainers actually delivered and has that been relevant. Have you felt that, the content being delivered by the trainer is relevant, and are you gaining something out of it? Are you learning something out of it? And that is why sometimes you will see that, these surveys and the feedback questionnaires are, circulated, just after trainings, finish, or when the trainings have actually completed. Because what they want to make sure is that the trainings, when you attend, say, for example, a DVLA training, you're asked to fill up a questionnaire to say, was the training, suitable? There are a few multiple choice questions you tick mark, but the background of those questions, when they are analyzed, gives vital feedback to organizations or the training organization which is undertaking the training to say that the session was interesting. The learners must have gained something because, the learner, the trainer was actually able to strike a chord with the participants in the training, and that has led to a positive impact. Of the professionals attending that training, going home with something that they've learned with a bit of a positive impact. Okay?
Yes.
So in general, I think this learning outcome focuses on understanding why training needs to be done, what are the advantages of doing training, how the training cycle actually works, and what are the different methods through which training can actually be done within the organization. So if you refer to the handout, which I've given 3.1 and 3.2, and then this particular presentation, and I'm going to send you a bit of a handout with regards to LO4 that will help you crystallize something, a bit more in the concepts that we've discussed today, for this particular learning outcome 4.
That's fine.
Okay, good stuff.
Yes.
Any questions so far?
No, not at the moment.
Right. If you have any questions, drop me a quick email, and I'll come back to you, with suitable responses with regards to either an additional document or, some sort of a template that you could read, to get more knowledge on it.
Yeah, perfect.
Good stuff. So we will continue with the next learning outcome on Wednesday next week. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Are you having any sort of an Easter break?